the continued slide of culture, the blatant agendas, even in education, and the introduction of school choice and vouchers in many states, the admission process in Christian schools is seeing challenging days. While having an overabundance of prospective families and even student applicants would definitely seem to be a long-awaited blessing, what else does that bring to the table? How do you remain true to your mission and yet respond to the influx of enrollment? Or is it time to just enjoy the prosperous years and troubleshoot later? Well, these are just a few of the topics on this week's episode of the Teacher Edition podcast.
Welcome to the BJU Press Teacher Edition podcast, where Christian educators are encouraged and inspired as we bring you interviews, practical ideas, strategies, and answer your questions about teaching in today's culture. And here's your host, Jenny Copeland.
Welcome back, everyone. We really appreciate you joining us. As educators, you give and give and give, and we trust that these weekly podcasts are a source of refreshment for you in your week. Education is on the move, and it's important to be learning and growing and listening, and for that, we are so glad you're here. As we jump in today, just a reminder to visit our website. It is teachereditionpodcast.com. That's an easy way to access the episodes, and then you could even go back and listen to any that you've missed. Maybe there was one you found encouraging or particularly helpful. Go back anytime. You're going to find that library there. Of course, you can also find those on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Again, I want to encourage you to like, comment, and share the podcast. If you're enjoying the show, help get that word out by clicking that like button, leaving us a rating and a review. You can also quickly share episodes by just clicking on the share button and then sending those out to anyone on your contact list. You can also find us on social media, Teacher Edition Podcast on Facebook, and Teacher Edition Pod on Instagram and TikTok. Of course, you can also watch this episode by visiting us on YouTube at Teacher Edition Podcast. Okay, so let's loop back around to the topic of enrollment and admission, specifically in bringing new families and students into your school. So as an administrator, I was always so cautious. I guess I thought a lot about the area of the admission process. Honestly, it's really hard to tell all you need to know about a student in a tour, in an interview, recommendations, and transcripts. And there you have it. I mean, that sounds like quite the list, but how do you really know the students? And the decision to bring them into your school, I mean, it affects teachers, it affects students. I remember as a teacher just kind of wondering, okay, who's going to be coming in my class? Who's being let into the school? We were a small Christian school, and obviously the idea of a prospective student was gold. But how do we know who they really are? How do you find students who are going to be a really great fit for your school? So I'm really excited to talk about this today. Spring will be here before we know it. Families are already looking around. They're on the move. So I'm excited about this topic, but I'm even more excited to have Rachel Ladygo here with us to talk about this. So Rachel's been an educator for 19 years. She's currently a kindergarten teacher and an assistant administrator at Gunnery Road Christian Academy in Lehigh Acres, Florida. So she has degrees in emotional behavior disabilities, and she even has a master's in educational leadership. One of Rachel's responsibilities is that she's in charge of the entire enrollment process for all the new students there at their school. No small job. So I've been able to bump into Rachel several times over the years and in various ways, and I'm really excited that she's here today because I know with her expertise and her current role, she has a lot to bring to the table. So Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so as we get into today's topic, let's set a foundation so everyone understands where you are serving, like where you're coming from. Let's start with you telling us just a little bit about the background of your school, if you don't mind.
Sure. So we're down here in Lehigh Acres, Florida. It's close to Fort Myers. In our school, Gunnery Road Christian Academy, it's a ministry of Gunnery Road Baptist Church. And that church started in 1985. Our pastor, Terry Vance, he moved down here right after he graduated from Bob Jones, and he started a church. And then in 1998, God placed a burden on Pastor Vance's heart to start a Christian school as a ministry of that church. And the school was originally just a lot of families in the church getting together to teach their kids. Most of the teachers were even moms with just with their homeschooling kids. And they got together, maybe somebody was good at math, so they taught all the kids math. And there's a lot of combined classes during that time. But gradually, more and more kids enrolled in the school, and we started tearing down walls and expanding buildings and hiring qualified teachers. And now our school has 160 students from pre-K to 12th grade. And by God's grace, we are fully accredited through a lot of different agencies, and over 90% of our teachers are certified. So that's...
Wow, that's incredible. That is quite the story. That's a lot to happen in that short amount of time, for sure. Okay, so now where do you come into that story? Where does your story intersect? When did you join the ministry there?
Yeah, so Pastor Vance, like I said earlier, he was the one that started this ministry, the church and the school. And I met two of his daughters at college, and I became good friends with them. And then in 2006, as I was finishing up my bachelor's degree at Bob Jones University, I wasn't exactly sure where God was calling me to teach. One of my best friends, Jackie Vance, she came up to me with an opportunity. At this time, Florida was just starting a new preschool voucher program called Voluntary Pre-Kindergarten. This program allowed every 4-year-old child in the state to go to preschool for free using a state voucher. Her dad, Terry Vance, the pastor, was looking to start this program at their church, and they needed somebody with a degree to run the program. So one of the qualifications to receive the voucher money was to have a teacher with a degree in education. And we looked at my degree, and it matched up perfectly. So I ended up moving to Florida for the summer to teach at their school, and I never left. I'm so thankful that God brought me to this ministry. I really love what I do and the people that I work with. And I ended up teaching a few different grades at first. I taught preschool for the summer, and I taught a couple combined classes. And then one year I got to teach kindergarten, and I just really fell in love with that grade. And I've been teaching kindergarten for the past 17 years. And right now I really have a great schedule. I get to teach kindergarten in the morning. They all go home. I do some administrative work in the afternoon. And then I get to coach our middle school boys for flag football and basketball. So I get to do so many different things that I enjoy, and I really like it.
Okay, I would say that is quite the contrast. So we have kindergarten and we have flag football. Okay, so I mean, definitely Christian school. We know we all wear a lot of hats. That's very impressive. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, so you mentioned a little bit about the preschool voucher idea. So if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know how all that works, but Florida is a school choice state, I believe. So this seems to be something that's popping up around the country, kind of scattered around in various forms. But nonetheless, the basic premise of Christian schools being more of an option for a larger group of people due to that financial assistance is in one way or another the same among those states. So with this being available in Florida, how has that impacted your school? Since you work with enrollment admissions, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, so it really has impacted our school in a lot of good ways. Like I mentioned, we started out with that preschool voucher program way back in 2006, but we actually started taking the state scholarship in 2013. And so it really, I guess where it all began was with our preschool program, and that seemed to work so well that we decided that we would take it for the rest of our school. The preschool program, it allows students to attend our school, a year-round Christian school program, and the parents only have to pay $50 out of pocket. So you really can't beat a Christian education for that price.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And then our preschool teachers, they're really good, and they really do a good job. And everybody in the community they really want to put their kids in our school. This preschool school choice program has allowed hundreds of 4-year-olds to attend our school from families that might not have been able to afford Christian education. A lot of these kids, many of them don't come from a Christian home, and they just want our school because they think we have good education. But because of this voucher program, it's allowed hundreds of 4-year-olds to hear the gospel at our school. And even there was a tragedy in our community a couple of years ago. In a group of teenagers, they died in a car accident. And one of the teens that passed away, unfortunately, was a graduate from our preschool program. And our preschool teacher, she attended the funeral, and it just really touched our heart. They had a display table, and it had her preschool's friends book. that she made in our preschool, and that's what they displayed at her funeral. And so because we've been able to take in so many students from the community, we've been able to have just a really big impact on them. And, sometimes they come across posts on the Facebook community page and they say, where should we put our 4-year-old into school? And a lot of people, I like to look through and people will recommend our school and they'll say, it feels like a family atmosphere. And what they don't know is really, it's Christians getting together, and that's why it feels like a family. And they feel loved. Students that graduate from our preschool program and now they're in their late teens or even in their early 20s, they call us or they stop by when they run into problems in their lives. They reach out to Miss Jackie and Miss April because they really remember the love that they felt in our preschool program. And we even have a few boys that are teenagers now, and their family doesn't come to our church, but they come and they drive themselves to our church because they remember being in our preschool program and how that made them feel. And so I guess out of that, many families that came to our preschool program, they wanted to keep coming to our Christian school, but they couldn't afford it. And so we looked into the scholarship because we wanted to make sure that we could keep kids in our school. We wanted to keep on giving them the gospel and keep having a ministry to them. And at the same time, it was also a financial sacrifice for our church members to send their children to our school. We wanted to look into an affordable option so that we could have a ministry to these students. We didn't want people in our church to have to go to a public school or to get educated by people that they didn't really know. We wanted to be the people that were there to help them, to educate them. And so in 2013, we started accepting a statewide school choice voucher program for kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. And we really did our due diligence in researching this program. We didn't want to take any type of scholarship that would have strings attached. We didn't want anybody else coming in and saying, here's the curriculum you can use, or here's the type of teachers you can hire, or here's the rules that you have to have for our school. And while we appreciate the money that we do get from this program, each year we say if they change the rules and it goes against our Christian beliefs, we can't take this money. We can't take this program anymore because it's most important for us to make sure that we keep our Christian beliefs and that we don't compromise in any area. So that's pretty much where we are now.
Wow. That's an incredible story. I love hearing how they knew there was something different there. They were drawn to that. And what a ministry to hear how they kept coming back. You know, how many 4-year-olds grow up and go back to where they went to K4? So that's really impressive. So that's kind of talking about the impact it's had on your school. So to the focus of this podcast today, how would you say that impacted your enrollment process specifically? Since you oversee that, what would you say?
Yeah. So over the last 15 years, our school has really gone from around 50 students to 160 students. So it's really increased our enrollment. Right now, we really can't take any more students. Like I mentioned earlier, we've torn down some walls, we've expanded some buildings, and right now we're just at the spot where we like the number of kids that we have. It still has that family atmosphere, and we can know each of our students. It's not so big that kids really could slip through the cracks at this point. So we really like that. But as our school has grown, we've been really careful to try to stay true to our mission. As we interview new students, we want to prayerfully make sure that the student and the family will be a good fit for our school. During the enrollment process, we really lay everything out before the parents. We let them know we're not a Christian school in name only, but we really are Christians. We're thoroughly Christians in our beliefs and in our actions. Everything that we do, we try to tie back to God's word. But that being said, we're not a perfect school. You know, we're a school filled with sinners. Problems are going to occur in our school. And just like problems occur anywhere that you have a group of people together. And when these problems happen, we let the parents know we're not going to go by our personalities. We're going to go back to what does God's word say about this.
Right,
and we're really going to make sure that they understand we're not just trying to get new students. We want students that want to follow God's word. And so that's pretty much how it's affected our enrollment process. I also think now that we're able to take extra students in our school, it's been really helpful for us because many students have been able to start in our preschool program and continue all the way through high school. Many students have been able to accept Jesus as their Savior while they were at our school. And some of the students that have gotten saved in our school, they drive themselves to our church now, and some families have even started coming to our church because they started in our preschool and they noticed, hey, there's something different here. There's something that we're missing, and they've joined our church. And here in Florida, we have students from so many different countries. We have students in our school that speak Spanish and Portuguese and Creole and French and even Arabic in their home. And because of the school choice scholarship in Florida, we're able to have a ministry in these homes without even learning a new language, because their children come to our school and they learn English. Now they go home and they tell their parents, this is what I learned. And so it's like a mission field. And meanwhile, parents don't have to pay a lot of money. And it's really a good program for our school.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it sounds like it's been a benefit on so many sides. So a question I posed at the beginning of the episode was in relation to the trickiness, I guess, at times of knowing whether or not to accept a student into a school. Of course, that tuition payment really has a loud voice to a Christian school, but the impact of a student can be significant at the school, and especially if the student is not the best fit. Easier said than done, I know. So how can you tell? How can you know, in your judgment, in your expertise, if a student is a good fit for your school?
Yeah, like you said, it's really hard just in a school tour and just in a short meeting to know if a student's going to be a good fit in your school. But it's really, really important. And I think one of the most important things that we do is we sit down and we try to have an open and an honest conversation with the families and with the children that are going to come to our school. And when we meet with parents, we really emphasize how important it is for the school and the home to be on the same page. We tell the parents, if we as a school, if we're headed in one direction and the parents are headed in a different direction, it's going to be a really chaotic ride for their children. It's going to be confusing and frustrating. And we don't want our students to be frustrated and confused. We want to all work together. And we also are honest with the parents. We don't want our students to act one way at school and act a different way at home. And another way that we encourage our parents, we never would make anybody attend our church, but we just let them know this is a ministry of our church. If you want to find out what we're about before you enroll, why don't you come to church and why don't you see, what our ministry is all about? And a lot of times people will take us up on that and they find out. Sometimes they come back and they say, you know what? We appreciate what you've done, but we didn't realize what we were getting into. We don't think your ministry is good for us. We've had that happen before. And
better earlier than later.
Yeah, we'd rather that happen before they even enter our school and then find out they made a mistake later. But we're definitely more selective with accepting our older students. Our junior high and high school classes are small, and one student could really sour the whole atmosphere. For our older potential students, we want to know if the student really wants to be in our school. So we'll sit down in that same meeting and we'll ask the student, do you want to come to this school? And sometimes students are honest and they say, I really like the school I'm at. I don't want to leave my friends. Maybe there's a rule that you have at your school that I really don't want to follow. And they'll just let us know. And that's also really helpful to know ahead of time. And then we also need to make sure that the student will fit in academically. We want them to be academically successful. If a student can't keep up in a class, it's frustrating for the student, it's frustrating for the teacher, it's frustrating for the parents. And so we try to be upfront with even academically and say, we're going to give a placement test to your child and just see how they're doing. And after the placement test, we let the parents see their child's score compared to the rest of the kids in the class. And we let them know, hey, your child's would be in the middle of this class, or your child would be in the top of this class. We might not be too challenging for your child, or, your child's a couple of grades behind. This would be really hard. I don't know if they would actually be able to keep up, and we really don't want to frustrate them. And so our school mission is to provide a Luke 2:52 education to equip our students to love God and to serve others. And part of that Luke 2:52 education is to teach students how to interact socially. And so we do want to make sure that kids will fit in socially. Last year, we had a couple of our potential students come to school for half a day before they enrolled, just to see how they would.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And we found out for one of the students, it worked really well. And for another student, we found out, this probably wouldn't work well for you. And so it's just anything we can do to get interactions with students before we accept them in our school. That's just so helpful.
Yeah.
And then for our younger students, we're a little less selective. We take 40 new preschoolers every year because it's the way our program works. And then those 40 preschoolers, a lot of them want to continue in our kindergarten, and we'll take 16 just because of our class size. And so it's really nice when we accept the kindergarten students. We've had a whole year of preschool to kind of get to know them and to know the families. And that helps us to know if they're going to fit in kindergarten or not. And then one of my recent classes that I took, the professor challenged us to write out a list of what an ideal student would look like for each grade. And so I took that project and I just kind of turned it into a readiness checklist to give to the parents. And for preschool and for kindergarten, I give them a handout, and it just says, we know your child's unique. We know that God has made everybody different. But if you look at this checklist, you'll see a lot of different things that you can do to work with your child to make sure they will be successful in our school. And that's been helpful. When I first started being involved with preschool enrollment, I didn't do any academic testing. I just assumed they would learn everything they needed to know when they got to preschool. But this led to a couple of situations where I didn't meet the students before the school year started. And then when the school year started, it was obvious that they couldn't be in a classroom with 19 other kids. And it just led to some awkward situations where we eventually had to meet with the parents to say, oh, this isn't going to work. And so now I just meet with each of the preschoolers before they enter the class, and we do like a play-based screening where we're playing some games together. But I'm actually looking to see, can they sit down? Can they follow directions? Do they listen to their parents? Can they leave their parents without, being so afraid and scared and crying? So that's been really helpful.
These are great. That was so practical. So I really like the visit. That's a great idea. No matter what grade, even if they're visiting to play, you can tell a lot as they settle in for a day or for part of a day. I really like the checklist. That's really good. But something that really stuck out to me, I think, as a great theme through everything you said there, and a good takeaway for all of us and our listeners, is that open communication. When we try to hide, or maybe inadvertently we don't share everything about who we are, they don't know that, and they do need to make an educated decision on their side, but there also needs to be an understanding. And I noticed you pointed out they need to know who we are so that we can work together. And that's really how this goes with parents, with families, is we want to team with them. God has given that responsibility to the parent. And when we partner with them, we can't be a team if we're not going to be able to function on the same page. So I like how everything you said there kind of points back to the fact of, yes, we need to know about them. They also need to know about us. We need to make sure that we can work together as a team. So that's great. So even the most experienced and well-rounded educators are constantly, or should be constantly learning. As educators, we are constantly regrouping, redirecting, rethinking. I'm quite confident this applies to enrollment as well. So Rachel, as we wrap up this episode, what would you say are some lessons that you have learned along the way as you have dealt with families during the enrollment process? So obviously, these are things that we would love to learn from you and not have to just learn ourselves. But just kidding. Seriously, though, as you've navigated the enrollment process and that experience, what are some things that you've learned that you can share with our listeners?
I think you hit on something really important that you just mentioned. We really think it's good to communicate to our parents and let them know so we're all on the same page. And even we mentioned, just like you did, our view of parenting to parents. We believe that God gave children to parents, not to schools, not to governments. Parents are responsible for raising their children. And so one of the first things I learned was just because we take a scholarship, we do need to charge just a little bit so that parents feel a little bit of the weight. And so...
Interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I first started, one of my first meetings, I had a parent come in and she asked me, well, don't you feed breakfast to the kids? Don't you feed dinner to the kids? Don't you come and pick up the kids? Don't you have transportation? And how late can they stay? At their last school, they could stay till 10 o'clock at night. And that's when I realized we're not just a free place where you can drop off your children and think we can be the parents. You know, we're here to educate and to partner with you. We're not here to take your place. So that was a big lesson that I learned in the
Very interesting. Wow. Okay.
And then the most important tool that I have in the enrollment process is prayer. I really don't have the ability to choose the right families on my own. I need prayer and I need wisdom from God and discernment. And I also get counsel from our head administrator. He's always involved in the older student meetings and he meets with the families with me. And then when I meet with the younger students, I always ask him for advice and we work together on a lot of that. So it's good to have other people that you trust that you can talk to and kind of bounce ideas off of each other. A practical lesson that I learned the hard way for our preschool is to make sure that all the students are potty trained. I just assumed
minor detail.
That, you know, you would come to school and you would be potty trained. So that's something I've added to our enrollment forms. That has been very helpful for the teachers. They've been very thankful for that. And then another lesson that I learned was to always test the students, no matter what grade they're in, because even if they earn decent grades in a different school, it doesn't mean that in our particular school they're going to be able to get those same grades, or even that they know how to read well. Sometimes students are passed on grade to grade and they never develop the ability to read well. And that's something I need to know ahead of time. And then a hard lesson that I learned is that not every potential student is a good fit for our school. Sometimes we do have to say no. I really have to take into consideration how the child will fit with the other students in the class, how the child will fit with the teacher. And I need to preserve our school atmosphere and our culture. I need to protect the students that we have from ungodly influences. And I need to make sure that I'm not frustrating teachers. I can't take too many students so that the teachers can't manage the class. There's such a balance that I really need God's help to understand. And then we kind of hit on this earlier, but meeting the kids ahead of time, especially the younger ones, that has been so helpful. And so during one student interview last year for preschool, I had the family come in and the child wouldn't sit down and play any games with me. And instead, he started actually destroying my classroom. And the mom started chasing him around the room. Yeah. And the kid didn't stop. And the dad just stood there and watched everything. And when I told them the only way that he could come to our school is if he could come back for another interview and sit down and actually play with me. And they ended up trying to chase him around the school for 10 more minutes before they could get him out the door while he was screaming and disrupting other classes. So I'm really thankful that I met the student ahead of time and I was able to...
I'm guessing maybe wasn't a fit.
Yeah, he was not a fit. But even in those situations where it's obvious, it still is hard to look at a parent and say, it's just...
No.
Well, but
yeah, you want to be able to help them, but you have to weigh your cost at that for sure.
Yeah, so those are some of the lessons that I've learned
Those are great. That's excellent. And I like that you pointed out, too, the importance of testing the students regardless of whether or not they have a massive transcript to bring you. We quickly learn, I learned that as an administrator, that they can easily come to you with straight A pluses, but you have to make sure that they can be successful in your school and testing them regardless. Transcripts at some point, they might be a nice reference, but testing them is so important. So I'm so glad you touched on that. And of course, getting to meet that student and spend some time with them so you get to know them. And I couldn't agree more. It's sad anytime you have to tell a family no, because you want to be able to help them. You have a heart for the students and the children, and that's a good thing. But, it's just not a fit for everyone. And you do have to be the guardian of your school. And I like how you said that you have to think of your teachers, you have to think of your classes and how they'll get along. So practical. This is just really, really good information and great experience to draw from. Very practical. School choice is continuing its way through the country in various forms. And it's exciting for families to have that opportunity and for students to have that chance to be in a Christian classroom. But it's so important that those students be the right fit for our school, which means it has to be a right fit with our mission. That family has to fit in with who we are as a school according to our mission. Rachel, thank you for sharing your insights. You have a lot of expertise, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us today. It was so helpful.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's always nice to talk to you.
And listeners, thank you for joining us as well. I hope you were challenged and are leaving with some great ideas as well. Remember to go to teachereditionpodcast.com to submit questions for upcoming episodes. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and go follow us on social media. Now, once again, it's time to get back to your day. But it's not just any day, because every day in the classroom is your day to impact and inspire through God's power and through His grace working in you. Go do what God has called you to do.